diligence, care, honesty, and loyalty. And so those big four are basically the themes that go through all of your obligations as a member of a board of directors. So let me just go through a couple of examples. We don't have time to go through the whole extensive list. And you'll see in the info sheet that there's some really great resources that talk in accessible language about what your obligations are. But a couple of examples of diligence, care, honesty, and loyalty, and how that's acted out. One of them is the idea that you should participate in board meetings. Yeah. So if you agreed to be on a board, you honestly said that you could make that commitment. Your loyalty towards the organization is that you should come to those board meetings, etc. So you can always walk them through the big four. If there's a fraud, if there's something happening that seems kind of suspicious, and this great case that I think I really like is the story about this executive director who bought a BMW. It was a small organization. They were probably making about $30,000 a year. They bought a BMW, a Mercedes, and then they got like 2 country houses. And the board said, well, I thought maybe, you know, I thought maybe she'd inherited some money or, you know, something else had happened. But the court said, that's a pretty obvious situation where like you might want to pay a little bit closer attention to the finances and make sure that there's not some fraud happening. And of course there was a fraud happening. There was a lot of money that had been embezzled. So they're not saying like look all the time for any possible fraud, but something that's obvious, something that would make any of us, you know, think with our common sense, maybe there's something a little weird going on here.
Yeah, and asking those questions, I mean, there's always that challenge as a board member of how do I ask those questions in ways that I don't want to seem attacking, I don't want to hurt feelings, but framing it in a way that really it's kind of it's a good thing to know this for the health of the organization is helpful. And that's why sometimes also doing a session with the board on board liability is helpful because it can raise some of those questions, and that's what we often do in our training is make the space for some of those questions to come up that we can start getting answers.
Yeah, and none of us are born with this knowledge about how to be what our legal responsibilities are. And the other thing that I've really seen is I've seen people use the law as like a sword against each other, you know, so they say, you know, you better do that because you're legally responsible. And sometimes that information isn't accurate, and it can be a way that we can like fight with each other, where if we just have an understanding about basic legal responsibilities, maybe it clears some things up. I'm just going to run really quickly through a couple of other ones, and then I urge you to look at the info sheet and the other materials. So the other idea is if you're looking for like legal information, legal advice, or you're looking for accounting type information, that you wouldn't decide, I'm a lawyer, I'm an accountant, I can figure this out, that you would get the kind of professional advice that you would need so that you don't make mistakes and to avoid like disastrous situations. The idea that you would name competent people to run the organization. So if you're picking an executive director or coordinators, that you would make sure that they really had the skills to do the jobs that they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard for people to come into a job with all of the skills, but that the training and support is there, and the supervision to help people gain the areas that they're lacking on a little bit.
Right, and again, this is like something that I've seen folks can use against each other. That's not saying that you have to have the perfect skill set to do a job. I mean, they're really talking in the law about like not hiring someone who has no experience, you know, to do something that's completely different from their experience that they've done before. I'm going to end it there and let you look more in detail about some stuff. There's a lot of more important stuff for you to read up on, but I don't want to carry this video cast into the end of time.
And there's certainly also some good information sources around board liability. There's a guide that's been written, and we have copies at COCo. You can buy it from us or buy it directly. And you can see the information for how to get it below here. And then also the Comité sectorial de main d'œuvre. Some good information.
A great organization. Their information is only in French right now, but we're working together to try to figure out if there's a way to translate it. And their information is really designed by and for community organizations, and it's really a tool to check out that's extremely useful.
Yeah. So Sam, what can boards do to reduce liability risks? Are there some tools?
So we talked a little bit about healthy practices, you know, me not leaving the banana out and like making sure to mop the water up and overall taking care of organization. We'll talk a little bit about insurance and indemnification in a second. But generally what I've seen can be pretty useful is this idea of checklists. And you'll see there's 2 links in the info sheet that give you a sample of a checklist that will provide a list of things that you can think of that your organization needs to do every year. So, you know, one of the things that board members can be personally responsible for is if employee source deductions and employer contributions aren't paid. So what I've seen organizations do is to take that as an idea and make a checklist about what they're going to ask at every board meeting. So they'll say at every board meeting, have they been paid? Can you show me something that shows that they've been paid?
Yeah.
You know, is our annual declaration or our charitable information return been sent? So just thinking about the life cycle of your organization and the annual cycle and making a list of the things that you would want to pay attention to. Do all employees have contracts?
Yeah.
You know, those kinds of things.
And that's also a really good, one of those checklists is a really good tool to use when you do board orientation, because then people say, annual declaration, what is that?
What is that?
And so we can educate ourselves more about those things and then make sure on a yearly basis or on a quarterly basis that it's actually being done.
And I think it's a really efficient way, like you're saying, to deal with turnover, because there is a lot of turnover in community organizations, and so you can learn all about your responsibilities as a board member, and then, whoop, you're gone. And so if these checklists can be passed down from board generation to board generation.
You said a word earlier, indemnification.
Yeah, this word is, it's a kind of legal term, indemnification. What the heck does indemnification mean? It means that an organization will put a statement in their bylaws. Have you seen these statements before? Where they'll say that the organization will cover any board members for any expenses around being sued, as long as the lawsuit isn't because the board member acted badly or was negligent. So, you know, even if we do our best to act well, sometimes people sue, sometimes conflicts happen, and sometimes we make mistakes, even if it's not as a result of bad behavior or negligent behavior. Because you know what? We all make mistakes.
Yeah, so if it's not in your bylaws, you might want to check out the samples that we've referred to in the info sheet, and you might want to think about the next time you redo your bylaws, not to go through any special procedure around it, but if you're redoing your bylaws, this might be a really good clause to insert in it.
And for people who are concerned about liability before they come onto your board, I think it's a pretty nice way to make sure that you're going to take care of them. And for organizations that are really concerned about membership, and I think that's an important thing to be concerned about, and you're working with marginalized populations or people who are more in a vulnerable situation, I think it's a really nice way to take care of members who are then going to sit on your board.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other thing you mentioned is liability insurance.
And there's a bunch of different types of liability insurance, and you can find more information that explains this in our info sheet. But basically, a lot of organizations have considered getting director and officers liability insurance, which, kind of like indemnification, will cover board members for any of the costs around a lawsuit or for being sued, as long as they didn't act negligently or badly. And it's kind of nice, because if you're going to indemnify board members, then that means the organization itself has to pay. So the organization can then insurance up so that someone else pays if this happens. People worry a lot about the expense of this type of insurance, but we found some pretty affordable plans, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on the size of the organization also, but certainly, you know, under $500, well under in a lot of circumstances.
Yeah.
And it's something, it's not one of those things of a must do, it's not required by law, but it's certainly, it's a good practice to think about. Is that something that you can put in place for your board of directors? And
it's, again, that careful balancing process of, like, thinking, you know, what kind of folks do we work with? You know, do we work with people who, you know, are vulnerable? What kind of conflict comes up at our organization? If it's going to cost us $400, this is just a random figure, it will depend on how much income you have every year. Is it worth it to us? You know, if we only have a $50,000 a year, and you just have to do a careful balancing act. But yeah, as Frances said, it could be a good practice, and it can really help to protect yourself and your organization.
And the challenge used to be that we would go to our insurance brokers and kind of figure it out on an individual basis. There's more insurance companies that are, there seem to be at least, that are responding to this need in the not-for-profit sector. And there's a really wonderful resource through Volunteer Canada, through their insurance package. They've set something up so that it's quite easy to move into it. So it's not too much legwork, not too expensive, good practice. Yeah. And you can find the Volunteer Canada information. It's below here and also in their info package.
Yeah, and they have all types of insurance, and they offer different packages, so they're a really interesting resource to check out.
Yeah. So look into it. Be careful about board liability. Don't spend too much time there, but make sure the basics are covered.
Exactly. Thanks so much.